Hey there, hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video, we're going to be coding the game Tic Tac Toe in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, I already have a tutorial on Tic Tac Toe on my channel, but for this project, I want to take a different approach to creating the same game. So the current project that I have on my YouTube channel focuses mainly on JavaScript, and for this project, I want to focus more on the HTML and CSS side. So we're going to be using the CSS grid layout. So what you see here is the final result of this tutorial, and we can click on some of these cells, and you can see if we have 3 in a row, we get tic-tac-toe, and therefore we have a winner. So now the game is over and I can't click on any more cells. However, I could restart the game. And you can see tic-tac-toe, okay? So this is what we'll be building in this video. And very quickly, I just want to mention that on my YouTube channel, you'll find various coding tutorials. So here you can see I have some programming courses. So I have a course on Pygame, object-oriented programming in Python and C++, and I have projects for Python, Java, and many other projects in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So there are many game tutorials such as Pac-Man, Flappy Bird, Wordle, Connect 4, Candy Crush, Blackjack, and so on. And I also have some web projects that are not related to games, okay? So you can find all these tutorials on my YouTube channel as well as on kenyipcoding.com. Alright, so for this tutorial, I've gone ahead and created 3 files: index.html, tic-tac-toe.css, and tic-tac-toe.js. And I have the boilerplate code ready, and I changed the title to tic-tac-toe. So let's link our style sheet. And let's also add our JavaScript. Alright, so now we've linked the 2 files. Now let's work on the HTML content of our page. So I'm going to give our page a header, and I'm going to call this tic-tac-toe, and I'm going to add an HR line, and let's also add a break line for spacing. And here I'm going to add a div, and we're going to give it an ID of game board. And with this ID, we can reference this div tag and style it using CSS. So within the game board, I'm going to create 9 cells for the tic-tac-toe game since it is a 3x3 board. So I'm going to create a div, and we're going to add an attribute called data cell index. And here I'm just going to assign it 0. And let's also add a class. So I'm going to give this class name GameCell. And basically, we're going to reference all the cells using the class name GameCell so that we can style them in CSS. Now, I'm going to copy and paste this 8 more times. And we need to change the index. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so now we have 9 cells in total. And essentially, we're going to structure the tic-tac-toe game to use 9 cells. Each cell has an index number, which is the data cell index. And this is how we're going to order the cells. So the first row is going to be 0, 1, 2. And then the second row is 3, 4, 5. And then the last row is 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. I'm going to double click on the index.html, and here you can see we have our header and we have the HR line, and you can't see anything in the cells since they don't have any content. So I'm going to add X to each one. And now if I refresh the page, you can see we have 9 X's. And we're going to keep the X's for now until we finish styling our game. So after we've created the game board, we're going to add a button. And this button is going to have an ID of game restart button. And in the button, I'm going to add a text restart game. So now if I refresh the page, you can see we have our restart game button. Alright, so that's all we need for the HTML. Now let's style up our game using CSS. So let's style the body. And I'm just going to add a background color of slate blue. Or let's do slate gray instead. So this is going to be a temporary color that we're going to add to the background. At the very end, I'm going to replace the background with an image. And for the font, we're going to use Arial. The font color is going to be white. And we're going to do text align center so that we center all the text on our page. Alright, now if I refresh the page, you can see the background color is slate gray. and we've centered everything. Now notice here that this HR line is quite long. It stretches across the page. So we're going to change the width of that, and I'll also change the color as well. So for the HR line, I'm going to give it a width of 500 pixels, a height of 2 pixels, a background color. We're going to make it sky blue, and we're going to remove the border. Alright, so now if I refresh the page, you can see the line is shorter now, and we've removed the border, and the color is sky blue. Now let's style the game board. So the game board is a div tag with an ID game board, so we can reference this ID in our CSS file. So to reference an ID, we would use the hash symbol, and the ID is game board. So I'm going to make the div have a width of 450 pixels and a height of 450 pixels. And we're also going to center the board, so margin 0 auto. And let's add a background color of sky blue. The text color is going to be white. And let's also add a border. So the border is going to be 6 pixels thick, and we're going to have a solid light blue color. And I want to round the corners of the border. So here I'm just going to do border radius, set it to 10 pixels. You can see our game board is now 450 pixels by 450 pixels, and the color is sky blue, and it has a border that is light blue with rounded edges. Now let's add some cells inside this game board. So we have 9 cells, and each one has a class called game cell, so we can reference this class and add styling in CSS. So to reference a class name, you would use a dot or point and the name of the class. In this case, it is game cell. And for the game cell, we're going to give it a border 6 pixels thick, solid, and light blue. And we want to round the border radius 2 pixels. And I also want to add a font size of 100 pixels. So now if I refresh the page, you can see we have our game cells. Now I want all the game cells to fit inside the game board. So we're going to use the CSS grid to place these cells. So over here, I'm going to add display grid. And for the grid, we need to add grid template. And here we're going to specify how many rows and columns. So we're going to repeat 3 and 1 FR and repeat 3 and 1 FR. And so for each row and column, we're going to have 3 cells, and the FR here stands for 1 fractional unit. So if I refresh the page now, you can see we now have 3 rows and 3 columns, and in each row and column, we have 3 cells. Now there is an issue, and that is the text is not centered inside the cell. So to do that, I'm going to add display flex. And we're going to add justify content center. So this is going to center the text horizontally. And we're going to add align items center. So this is going to align the text vertically. All right, so now if I refresh the page, you can see the text is now centered for each cell. All right, so we've basically finished styling our game board. So I'm going to get rid of the text. So for each game cell, we're going to remove the text. All right, let's refresh the page. And there we go. We have a nice clean tic-tac-toe board. Now here I want to add one more style class for the cell. So this is going to be winning game cell. And for this, we want to distinguish which cells are the winning cells. So here I'm going to add a background color of white and a font color of sky blue. Basically, for the cells that are the winner cells, we're going to change the background color of the cell to white and the font to sky blue. So we're pretty much inverting the color. Now the last thing I want to style is the restart game button. And here we have an ID called game restart button for the button tag. So we're going to reference that using hash game restart button. So I'm going to make the height 50 pixels. The width is going to be 150 pixels. And we're going to give it a border 5 pixels thick, solid, and light blue. Let's round the edges of the border. So border radius is going to be 5 pixels. And I want to add a background color. So the button is going to be sky blue. And the font is going to be white. Let's set the font size to 20 pixels. So if I refresh the page, You can see the button is now bigger, so the button is 150 pixels wide and 50 pixels tall. The color is sky blue and the text color is white. And we have a border that is light blue with rounded edges. Now here you can see the button is actually touching the bottom of the game board. So we're going to add some margin to push the button down. So here I'm going to add margin top. So from the top, I want to push down by 20 pixels. Alright, now let's refresh the page. And you can see the button has now been shifted down 20 pixels from the game board. Alright, so we've pretty much finished styling our game. Now let's add the logic for the game using JavaScript. So let's add some variables for our game. When we're playing the game, we're alternating between two players, player X and player O. So here I'm going to add player O and player X. And let's also add another variable to keep track of the current player. So here I'm just going to set the default player to player O. Next, I want to create an array to keep track of the state of our game. So let's call this game board. And essentially, we're just going to have 9 empty strings. So by default, all the cells are empty. Alright, so now we have 9 empty strings in the array. And I'm going to create another variable called game cells. And this is going to be an array that holds references to all the game cells in our HTML code. So this game cells variable is going to hold an array to all the references of these game cell tags. Alright, so when our page loads, I'm going to do window.onload function. So when our page loads, the first thing I'm going to do is get all the game cells from our HTML code. So game cells is going to be document dot get element by class name. And notice here it is get elements, so this is plural, and the class name is going to be game cell. And this is going to give us all the div tags with the class name game cell. Now what do I want to do with all these cells? Well, I want to make them clickable. So when we click on a cell, we assign it an X or an O. So here I'm going to do for let cell of game cells. So we're going to iterate through this array and we're going to do cell.add event listener. Each cell is going to listen for a click. And if we do click on a cell, we're going to trigger a function. And I'm going to call this function place cell. So let's define the function down here. So what do we want to do when we click on the cell? Well, we're just going to add text to the cell. So I'm going to do this.inner text and set it to current player. So the keyword this refers to the HTML tag that is being clicked on. So let's refresh the page. And now I'm going to click on some cells. And here you can see current player is O, and therefore every cell we click on has an O. Now we want to alternate. So we want to alternate between O and X. So here I'm going to do current player and reassign it. And I could use an if-else statement, or I can use the ternary operator. So if current player is equal to player O, if that is the case, we're going to reassign current player to player X. Otherwise, we assign the current player O. Alright, let's refresh the page. And I click on a cell, we have O. Then the next one is X, O, X, O, X, O, X, O. Okay, so we can now alternate between the players. And one thing to note here is if I click on this cell, you can see we are alternating and we are overwriting the cell. Now this does not happen in Tic Tac Toe, so we need to make a check before we change the cell. So this is why we have this game board array. This array is going to keep track of the state of our Tic Tac Toe board. So by default, everything is empty. Every time we update the Tic Tac Toe board, we need to update this array as well. So here I'm going to do const index, and I'm going to get the data cell index from each HTML tag for the cell. So we're going to do parse int this.get attribute, and the attribute name is data cell index. So you can see for each div tag for the game cell, we have an attribute called data cell index, and it is a string from 0 to 8. For that reason, we need to take this string and convert it to an integer. And here I'm going to do if game board at index of index is not equal to an empty string, that means a player has already taken that cell, and so we're going to return. So if we click on a cell and that cell is not empty, then we're not going to process the click. So this is going to make a check with the game board. However, we need to also update the game board every time a player clicks on a cell, because by default, everything in the game board is empty. So here I'm going to do game board at index and assign it to current player as well. So we update the text for our game cells in the HTML page, and we also update the array that keeps track of the state of our game. And then afterwards, we switch the current player. All right, so if I refresh the page and I click on this middle cell, we have an O. If I try to click on it again, you can see it doesn't change. So player X has to click on a different cell. Okay? Alright, so now we can click on the cells of our game board to place an O or an X. Now what we need to do is check for winners. So over here, I'm going to call a function called check winner. And let's define that down here. So we can start by checking each row, and since each game cell has an index, we can just check the combinations of the indices. So for example, if I were to do each row, we would have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8. So these are possible winning conditions for rows. And we also have columns. So we can do 0, 3, 6, 1, 4, 7, or 2, 5, 8. And finally, we have the diagonals. So going this way and this way. So we have 0, 4, 8 and 2, 4, 6. So we have 8 possible combinations to check for. So I'm going to list them out over here. And we're going to call the variable winning conditions. And this is going to be an array of arrays. So we have the first 3 rows. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Next we have the 3 columns. So 0, 3, 6, 1, 4, 7, and 2, 5, 8. And finally, we have the diagonals. So we have 0, 4, 8, and we have 2, 4, 6. All right, so we have all the combinations for the winning conditions. Now what we need to do is iterate through this array of winning conditions and check the combinations within the game board. So basically, I'm going to check 0, 1, 2 first. So for the game board, I check index 0, index 1, and index 2. If they are all X's or O's, then we have a winner. Otherwise, we check the next winning condition combination. So let's scroll down. And over here, so within this function, we're going to iterate through all the winning conditions and check the game board to see if the winning condition combination has all X's or O's. So let's iterate through the array. So for let win condition of winning conditions. So this is an array of arrays. So I want to extract each value of the array. So if we have 0, 1, 2 or 3, 4, 5, I want to be able to access these values more easily. So I'm going to create 3 variables. Let A equal to game board of win condition at index 0. Let's also do the same for B. So this is index 1 and C. Index 2. Okay, and here we're going to make a check if A is equal to B and B is equal to C. That means A, B, and C are equal, but they can also be equal if they are empty. So here we're going to make an additional check, and A is not equal to empty. If that is the case, we're going to add the style class winning game cell for each of the game cells to make the background white. So essentially, we're going to apply this class to the winning game cells. So over here, we need to figure out which of these game cells are the winners. So I'm going to iterate through the game board. So for let I is equal to 0, I is less than game board dot length, I plus plus, if win condition dot includes I game cells at index I dot class list dot add winning game cell. All right, let's refresh the page. And if I do this, you can see the first row is a winner, and therefore we change the cell to have a white background. And we do so by adding the winning game cell class name to the cell. Now there's one issue, and that is the game is already over. However, we can still continue playing. And if we continue playing, you can see now we have 2 winners in this tic-tac-toe game. So we need to prevent this, and to do so, I'm going to create a new variable called game over, which is a boolean, and it's going to keep track of whether or not the game is over. So over here, I'm going to add game over, and by default, it is false. And when is the game over? The game is over when we have a winning condition. So after we've updated the styling for the winning cells, I'm going to set game over to true. And one more thing we can add is return. So basically, if we already have a winner, we don't need to continue checking every win condition because we already found one. So return is going to end this function. Alright, so we update game over to true here, and in our place cell function over here, we're going to make a check if game over return. So if the player tries to click on a cell when the game is over, then we're going to ignore it and return. Alright, let's refresh the page. And here you can see we have a winner. And if I try to click on any other cell, nothing happens. So the game is over. And now what we need to do is restart the game for the next round. And restarting the game is easy. First, we need to get a reference to the button. So I'm going to create a variable called restart game button. So when the page loads, we're going to assign this variable restart game button. So restart game button is going to be document dot get element by ID, and the ID of this button tag is game restart button. Okay, so this is the ID of the button tag, and just like with each cell, we want to add a click handler. So I'm going to do restart game button dot add event listener, and the button is going to listen for a click. And if we click on the button, we're going to call a function called restart game. So let's define the function. So down here, I'm going to define the function restart game. And restarting the game is actually very easy. All we need to do is reset everything to the starting conditions. So this includes all the variables and the UI. So I'm going to start by flipping game over back to false. Next, we need to reset game board. So we're going to make it 9 empty strings again. And now what we need to do is remove the winning game cells. So here we're going to iterate through all the game cells. Let cell of game cells. We're going to remove the text. So cell.inner text is equal to empty again. And we're going to remove from the class list winning game cell. So cell.classList.remove winning game cell. All right, let's refresh the page. And here you can see O is the winner. And now I'm going to restart the game. And X is the winner. Okay, now let's check all the winning conditions. So let's check row by row, then column by column, and then the diagonals. So first row looks good. Second row looks good. Third row looks good. Now let's check each column. First column looks good. Second column looks good. Now let's check the diagonals. So diagonal works. Let's check the other diagonal. So all the winning conditions work for our game. Now one more thing I want to add is the background image. So I have this background image, which is a cloud background. And if you want to use this background image, you can just click on the GitHub link in the video description below. In the GitHub link, you'll find the repo for the completed code for this project. And it also includes this image. So let's add the image. So I'm going to remove this background color. And I'm going to do background url./background.jpg. And I'm going to add some more attributes. So no repeat. Center, so horizontally and vertically, and fixed. And I want the background size to cover. Alright, now let's refresh the page. And you can see the background is this cloud image, okay? Alright, so we have a fully functional game of Tic Tac Toe written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I definitely encourage you to continue working on this game. So you can play around with the styling, change up the colors. You can also add new features. One feature you can add is a scorekeeper, so you can track how many times O has won and how many times X has won. And if you want, you can make it so that instead of clicking the cells yourself for the two players, you can make the second player choose a cell at random. So basically, it'll be you playing against the computer. So this is all up to you. But yeah, that's it for this video. Hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you did, make sure you give this video a like. If you have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. And as always, if you want to stay up to date for more JavaScript project tutorials like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.